Imagine a quiet May evening in the year 1776 in the small Bavarian town of Ingolstadt. Somewhere in the narrow streets between the ancient stone houses, a handful of people gather in the candlelight. They talk about the future of humanity, about a new world where there will be no kings, no priests, no rich or poor. Sounds like utopia, doesn't it? But on this very evening, an order is born that centuries later will come to symbolize the most powerful conspiracy in human history. Greetings, my dear listeners. Write in the comments what city you are from and what time it is. Today, we are going on a journey through one of the most mysterious pages of European history, where Enlightenment philosophy met with secret rituals and noble ideals intertwined with suspicions of a world conspiracy. To understand how the Illuminati came to be, you need to plunge into the atmosphere of that time. The 18th century was an era when the old world was bursting at the seams. Imagine Europe at that time. Absolute monarchies ruled by God's grace. The church dictated what to think and believe, and the common people lived a miserable existence under the oppression of feudal orders. But the wind of change is already blowing. In the salons of Paris, philosophers talk about equality and fraternity. In England, Newton discovers the laws of the universe. And in America, colonists are preparing to throw off the yoke of the British crown. It is in this atmosphere of intellectual ferment and social tension that a young professor of canon law, Adam Weishaupt, emerges. Imagine this man, 30 years old, lean, with a penetrating gaze, who sees the world not as it is, but as it should be. Weishaupt teaches at the University of Ingolstadt, one of the strongholds of Jesuit education. But his mind is no longer confined within the narrow confines of Catholic orthodoxy. He reads Voltaire and Rousseau, ponders the ideas of the Enlightenment, and gradually a grand plan matures in his mind. On the 1st of May, in the year 1776, the same day that the Declaration of Independence was being drafted in faraway America, Weishaupt gathered 5 of his students and founded what he called the Order of the Perfected. Later, this fellowship would receive a name that would go down in history forever, the Illuminati, meaning enlightened ones. What kind of world did these first Illuminati dream of? Close your eyes and try to imagine Weishaupt's utopia. It is a world without borders and nations, where people are united only by reason and virtue. A world without private property, which, according to Weishaupt, is the source of all misery and inequality. A world without traditional religions, whose place will be taken by the cult of reason and nature. A world without monarchs and aristocrats, where power belongs to the wisest and most virtuous. But how to achieve this ideal state? Weishaupt realized that openly preaching such radical ideas in Catholic Bavaria would be tantamount to suicide. So he chooses the path of the secret society, where truth is revealed gradually, as the adherent is ready to accept it. You can imagine this system as a tiered pyramid, where each level knows only what it needs to know to fulfill its task. At the lower levels of the order, newcomers were told about the noble goals of self-improvement and helping their neighbors. Here everything looked quite innocent: the study of sciences, development of virtues, mutual help of brothers in the order. But the higher the adept climbed the hierarchical ladder, the more radical ideas were revealed to him. And only the chosen ones who reached the highest degrees recognized the true goal of the order: the complete transformation of human society. Weishaupt was not just a visionary, but also a talented organizer. He developed a complex system of pseudonyms. He himself bore the name Spartacus, in honor of the leader of the slave revolt. His associates were also given the names of great freedom fighters: Cato, Brutus, Socrates. This game of conspiracy created a special atmosphere of involvement in a great cause, a romantic veil of mystery that attracted young minds. The order grew slowly at first. In the early years, it consisted of only a few dozen people, mostly students and young intellectuals from Ingolstadt and the surrounding towns. But everything changed when Baron Adolf von Knigge, the man who would become the second key figure in the history of the Illuminati, joined the order in the year 1780. Knigge was the complete opposite of Weishaupt. Where the professor was sullen and withdrawn, the Baron shone with charm and eloquence. Where Weishaupt thought categories of philosophical abstractions, Knigge perfectly understood human psychology and was able to find an approach to any interlocutor. He was a born recruiter, a man who could convince anyone of anything. It was Knigge who turned a small group of Bavarian students into an extensive international organization. He traveled throughout the German lands, met with influential people, and founded new lodges. Under his leadership, the order began to infiltrate Masonic lodges, using their structure and connections to spread. It was an ingenious move. Freemasonry was already a well-organized network across Europe, and the Illuminati could take advantage of this ready-made infrastructure. But between Weishaupt and Knigge gradually grew contradictions. The founder of the order was a Puritan, a fanatic of the purity of the idea. Knigge, on the other hand, was a pragmatist, willing to compromise to achieve his goal. Weishaupt wanted to create a new humanity. Knigge simply wanted an efficient organization. These differences would eventually lead to a split, which would be the beginning of the end of the order. Meanwhile, the ideas of the Illuminati resonated in the hearts of many prominent people of the era. The poet Goethe and the philosopher Herder, dukes and barons, professors and writers joined the order. Each of them saw in the teachings of Weishaupt what they wanted to see. Some of them hoped for social reforms. Others were attracted by the mystical component. Others were simply attracted by the atmosphere of mystery and exclusivity. By the mid-1970s, the order had several thousand members scattered throughout Germany and even beyond. Illuminati lodges appeared in Austria, France, and Italy. It seemed that Weishaupt's dream of a world brotherhood of intelligent people is close to fulfillment. But it was at this point that luck turned away from the order. 1,780 years brought to the order of the Illuminati not only rapid growth, but also the first serious trials. Imagine the atmosphere of those years. Europe was in turmoil. The old orders were cracking under the pressure of new ideas, and those in power were watching the spread of Enlightenment teachings with growing alarm. In this atmosphere of general ferment, even the most innocent secret societies begin to be perceived as a threat to the existing order. Elector Karl Theodor of Bavaria, ruler of the lands where the order originated, was a man of conservative views and deep religiosity. The Catholic Church, the Jesuits, the traditional aristocracy, all these forces were constantly whispering to him about the danger posed by secret societies. And indeed, could they look calmly on an organization which openly preached the abolition of private property, the abolition of monarchy, and the replacement of Christianity by the cult of reason? The first warning signals were sounded in the year 1780, when the Elector issued a decree banning all secret societies that had not received official authorization. But the Illuminati were too well hidden, too deeply penetrated into the structures of power to be seriously harmed by this decree. Many members of the order held high positions in the state apparatus, in universities, in the judiciary. They simply ignored the inconvenient law, continuing their activities with even greater caution. But the real danger to the order was not external enemies, but internal contradictions. The conflict between Weishaupt and Knigge, which began as an ordinary friction of character, gradually developed into a fundamental disagreement about the aims and methods of the order. The founder demanded unquestioning obedience to his will, believing himself to be the sole guardian of the true doctrine. Knigge, on the other hand, saw this authoritarianism as a denial of the very principles of enlightenment for which the order fought. Imagine this drama. two outstanding men, united by a common dream of a better world, slowly turn into irreconcilable enemies. Their correspondence of those years is full of mutual reproaches and accusations. Weishaupt accused Kniga in turning the order into a banal Masonic lodge in the departure from revolutionary principles. Kniga replied that Weishaupt had turned into a despot, which stifles all initiative and creative thought in the bud. So, this conflict could not remain a secret to the rank and file members of the order. Many of them were educated people, accustomed to independent thinking. They saw their leaders quarreling over power and influence, and this destroyed the image of wise counselors, which was so carefully created in the order's rituals. The romantic flair of the secret brotherhood was evaporating, revealing quite prosaic human passions. In the year 1780, Kniga finally broke with the order, publicly announcing his resignation from it. It was a devastating blow to the prestige of the Illuminati. The man who had brought most of its members into the order, who had been its face in the highest circles of society, was now openly criticizing the organization to which he had devoted several years of his life. But the most terrible blow awaited the order ahead. In July 1784, an event occurred that changed the fate of the Illuminati forever. One of the members of the order, the priest Jacob Lanz, was riding on horseback on a road near Regensburg when he was struck by lightning. This in itself would have been a mere accident if a search of the body had not uncovered compromising documents, lists of the order's members, plans for its activities, and correspondence between the leaders. Can you imagine the shock of the Bavarian authorities when they saw the true extent of an organization that had been operating under their noses for years? The documents contained the names of high-ranking officials, influential aristocrats, respected professors. But most importantly, they contained plans for the gradual seizure of power, methods of infiltration into government structures, and ways of influencing public opinion. Elector Karl Theodor was furious. He immediately ordered searches of the homes of prominent members of the order. The police seized a great number of documents which revealed the whole structure of the organization, its aims and methods of work. On the 22nd of June, in the year 1784, a new decree was issued, which not only banned the activities of the Illuminati, but also declared membership in the order as treason. For Weishaupt, it was a disaster. The man who had dreamed of changing the world suddenly found himself exiled in his own country. He had to flee Bavaria and seek refuge in other German lands. But his reputation was hopelessly ruined. Who would dare to shelter a man accused of high treason? The last blow was dealt by the Elector in March 1785, when he issued an even more severe decree. The death penalty for belonging to the Illuminati was now imposed. This was unprecedentedly cruel, even by the standards of the time. Usually, secret societies were simply banned, their members fined or imprisoned. But the death penalty? It meant that the authorities saw the Illuminati not just as troublemakers, but as a deadly threat to the very foundations of the state. The order, as an organized structure, ceased to exist almost immediately. Its members either fled abroad or hastened to publicly renounce their beliefs. Documents were burned, archives were destroyed, ties were severed. It seemed that Weishaupt's dream of enlightened humanity was buried forever. But paradoxically, it was the defeat of the order that made it truly famous. When the Bavarian authorities began to publish the seized documents in an attempt to prove the danger of the Illuminati, they unwittingly introduced their ideas to the whole of Europe. What had previously been known only to a small circle of initiates was now known to the general public, and the public was shocked. Imagine the reaction of an ordinary European of those years when he read about plans to abolish private property, to abolish marriage, to liquidate all existing states. For a person brought up in the Christian tradition, accustomed to the hierarchical structure of society, it sounded like a sermon of chaos and destruction. The Catholic Church immediately declared the Illuminati to be an instrument of Satan. Protestant preachers were also not immune, seeing their teachings as a threat to all Christian values. Conservative thinkers wrote pamphlets warning of the terrible danger that secret societies posed to the well-being of nations. But the most interesting thing is that the ideas of the Illuminati made a strong impression not only on their opponents, but also on their supporters. Young people all over Europe read the forbidden documents, seeing in them a manifesto of the coming liberation of mankind. Revolutionaries found in Weishaupt's plans a ready-made program of action. Intellectuals admired the order's orderly and logical system. The revelations of the Illuminati had a particularly strong impact on France, where revolutionary sentiment was already running high. Many contemporaries noted the striking similarity between the ideas of the Bavarian order and the slogans that would soon be heard on the streets of Paris. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Is not that what Weishaupt sought? The abolition of estates, the abolition of aristocratic privileges, the secularization of society. All this was prescribed in the order's documents long before the storming of the Bastille. It is not surprising that when the revolution broke out in France in 1789, many saw it as the fulfillment of Illuminati plans. This opinion was especially strengthened after it became clear that many of the revolutionary figures were indeed connected with secret societies. Of course, there was no direct evidence of Illuminati influence on the French events, but the coincidences seemed too numerous to be coincidental. So the Dead Order found a new afterlife. In the imagination of their contemporaries, the Illuminati had transformed from a small group of Bavarian intellectuals into a powerful international organization capable of overthrowing kings and changing the course of history. Every revolutionary upheaval, every political upheaval was now attributed to their secret influence. Imagine late 18th century Europe, a continent gripped by revolutionary fever, where old truths are crumbling one by one, and new, unprecedented ideas are emerging in their place. In this atmosphere of general ferment, the Dead Order of the Illuminati takes on a new, almost mystical life. The French Revolution, which began in the year 1789, was the event that forever linked the name of the Illuminati with the idea of a world conspiracy. When Parisian crowds stormed the Bastille, when aristocrats were taken to the guillotine, when churches were transformed into temples of reason, many observers were horrified to recognize in what was happening the very plans that had been laid down in the documents of the Bavarian order. Abbé Augustin Baruel, a French Jesuit who became one of the most influential conspiracy theorists in history, painted a picture of a grand conspiracy against Christian civilization in his memoirs on the history of Jacobinism. According to his version, the Illuminati did not disappear after the defeat in Bavaria, but only went deep underground, from where they continued to lead the revolutionary processes throughout Europe. Every Jacobin, every Sansculotte was, in Baruel's opinion, a conscious or unconscious agent of this secret organization. Imagine the impact of these ideas on the minds of contemporaries. For someone who grew up in a stable, hierarchically organized society, the changes taking place seemed so radical that they simply could not be explained by the natural course of events. There must have been some hidden force, some secret plan capable of turning the world upside down. And the Illuminati were perfectly suited to the role of this force. Baruel's conspiracy theory received unexpected confirmation when, in 1797, the English naturalist John Robison published a book entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe. Robison, a fellow of the Royal Society and a man of impeccable scientific reputation, claimed that during his travels on the continent, he had personally observed the activities of the Illuminati and could confirm their role in the preparation of the French Revolution. These two authors, writing independently of each other, a Catholic priest and a Protestant scientist, created the basis for all subsequent theories about the secret world government. Their books were translated into all European languages and reprinted dozens of times, forming in the public consciousness the image of the Illuminati as the architects of a new world order. But the most surprising thing was that the real history of the order gradually receded into the background before its mythological version. Adam Weishaupt, who after his exile from Bavaria lived out his days in the small Thuringian town of Gotha, working as a librarian, turned in the mass consciousness into a demonic genius, able to control the fate of nations from his mysterious refuge. The reality was much more prosaic. The former head of the order wrote philosophical treatises, gave lectures, tried to justify his former views. He several times publicly stated that the order of the Illuminati long ago does not exist, that all talk of its secret activities, a figment of the sick imagination. But who wanted to listen to boring explanations when it was much more interesting to believe in the existence of an all-powerful secret organization? The Napoleonic Wars only increased the belief in the power of the Illuminati. When the Corsican conqueror marched triumphantly across Europe, crushing thrones and altars, many saw this as the fulfillment of the order's long-standing plans. Napoleon himself, by the way, was a Mason, as well as many of his marshals and ministers. This fact further strengthened suspicions of the existence of a secret governing center. What seemed particularly impressive was how easily Napoleon destroyed age-old institutions. The Holy Roman Empire, which had existed for almost 1,000 years, disappeared at the stroke of a pen. The papal state was abolished, the pontiff himself taken prisoner. Ancient monarchies crumbled like houses of cards. Could one man, even a brilliant general, have done all this? Wasn't behind him the same secret power that Baruel and Robison wrote about? Symbolism, too, played its part in reinforcing the legend. Napoleon surrounded himself with Egyptian motifs, pyramids, sphinxes, obelisks. All this reminded of ancient mysteries, of the secret knowledge which, according to some theories, possessed the Illuminati. Even the famous five-pointed star, which became the symbol of Napoleon's army, was perceived as a Masonic sign. After the fall of Napoleon in 1815, it seemed that the old order had triumphed. The Congress of Vienna had restored legitimate monarchies. The Catholic Church had regained its influence. Revolutionary ideas had been driven underground. But the belief in the power of secret societies did not disappear. On the contrary, it acquired new features. Now, the Illuminati were accused not only of political conspiracies, but also of attempts to destroy the foundations of Christian civilization. Conservative thinkers saw in the spread of liberal ideas in the growth of national consciousness, in the demands for constitutional reforms. Everywhere, the hand of secret puppeteers. Every student uprising, every labor revolt was attributed to the influence of the descendants of the Bavarian order. The revolutions of 1848, which swept across Europe almost simultaneously, were particularly impressive. How could the people of different countries, speaking different languages, practicing different religions, rise up against their rulers at the same moment? The only reasonable explanation seemed to be the existence of a single leading center coordinating the actions of the revolutionaries. At this time, a new element was added to the Illuminati conspiracy theory: the Jewish question. Anti-Semitic authors began to claim that the true leaders of the order were not Bavarian professors, but representatives of Jewish financial dynasties. The Rothschilds, who controlled European finance, became the main suspects in the organization of the secret world government. This version seemed particularly convincing because, indeed, many Jews actively supported liberal and revolutionary movements. And no wonder. It was these movements that fought for civil equality, for the abolition of religious restrictions, for the secularization of society, for Jewish communities that had suffered centuries of discrimination. Liberal ideas were synonymous with liberation, but anti-Semites interpreted this support in their own way. In their view, Jews supported revolutions not to achieve equality, but to seize power over Christian nations. The Illuminati became a Jewish instrument of world domination, and Weishaupt a puppet of international financiers. By the end of the 19th century, the legend of the Illuminati had acquired an almost complete form. Now it was not just a secret organization, but a whole system of interconnected structures: Masonic lodges, financial houses, revolutionary groups, intellectual circles. All of them allegedly worked on the implementation of a single plan: the destruction of traditional values, the destruction of nation-states, the establishment of world government. The emergence of Marxism and anarchism only strengthened these suspicions. Karl Marx and Mikhail Bakunin, who created the ideology of revolutionary reorganization of the world, were perceived as new incarnations of the spirit of the Illuminati. The First International, which united the workers' parties of different countries, seemed to be a direct heir of the Bavarian order. The Industrial Revolution, urbanization, secularization, all these processes, which radically changed the face of European civilization, were explained by the activities of secret forces. People, lost in a rapidly changing world, sought simple explanations for complex phenomena, and conspiracy theory provided such an explanation. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Illuminati had finally turned from historical fact to cultural myth. The real order, which existed for only 10 years and united a few hundred people, became a symbol of a secret power capable of controlling the course of world history. Every significant event, wars, revolutions, economic crises, was immediately associated with the activities of Weishaupt's heirs. World War I was further proof of the power of a secret world government. How else could one explain the fact that civilized European nations suddenly began to exterminate each other with unprecedented cruelty? Who benefited from this massacre, which destroyed the old Europe and cleared the way for new experiments? The Russian Revolution of 1917 particularly struck the imagination of conspiracy theorists. The fall of the Russian Empire, which had seemed an unshakable stronghold of traditional values, was perceived as the greatest triumph of the forces of destruction. The fact that many of the Bolsheviks were indeed of Jewish origin only strengthened the belief in a Jewish Masonic conspiracy. The appearance of the Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, a fraudulent document describing the plans of a worldwide Jewish conspiracy, was the culmination of this process. Although the protocols were fabricated by the Tsarist Guard on the basis of earlier French pamphlets, they seemed to many readers to be a revelation of the terrible truth. After all, they described the same plans attributed to the Illuminati: the destruction of traditional institutions, the establishment of a world government, the enslavement of peoples. Thus, the order of Bavarian intellectuals, who dreamed of the kingdom of reason and virtue, turned into a symbol of the world's evil. The noble ideals of the Enlightenment were forgotten, leaving only a dark legend of secret puppeteers controlling the fate of mankind from dark cellars. The myth of the Illuminati became part of the collective unconscious of Western civilization, manifesting itself whenever people faced incomprehensible and frightening changes. The 20th century was the era when the Illuminati myth finally broke away from its historical roots and turned into a universal explanation for all the woes of mankind. Imagine a world where empires that had existed for centuries collapsed in a few decades, where technological progress changed everyday life beyond recognition, where 2 world wars claimed tens of millions of lives. In such an environment, the search for the guilty became a psychological necessity, and the theory of a secret conspiracy became a convenient way to explain the unexplainable. Weimar Germany became a veritable laboratory of conspiracy theories. Defeat in the war, economic chaos, and political instability all demanded explanations that would not degrade the national dignity of the German people. It was much easier to believe that Germany had been betrayed by secret forces than to admit one's own mistakes and miscalculations. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Jews, they all coalesced into a single image of an enemy responsible for all the nation's misfortunes. Nazi propaganda masterfully exploited these sentiments. Hitler and his associates did not invent the Jewish Masonic conspiracy theory. They merely gave it a new, more aggressive form. In their interpretation, the Illuminati became part of a grand plan to enslave the Aryan race. Every liberal endeavor, every call for international cooperation was seen as an attempt to undermine Germany's national independence. But the paradox was that the Nazis themselves, in many ways, embodied the very principles attributed to the Illuminati. They too aspired to world domination. They too wanted to destroy traditional institutions. They too dreamed of creating a new type of man. The only difference was that instead of a cosmopolitan brotherhood of intelligent people, they proposed a racial hierarchy under German domination. The Holocaust has become a terrifying embodiment of conspiracy fantasies. Millions of innocent people died not because they posed a real threat, but because they were enlisted in a mythical conspiracy. The tragic irony of history was that the real conspirators were those who shouted the loudest about fighting conspiracies. After World War II, it seemed that conspiracy theories were discredited forever. The link between the search for scapegoats and mass crimes became too obvious. But human psychology is organized in such a way that the need for simple explanations of complex phenomena never disappears. And very soon, the Illuminati found a new life in the conditions of the Cold War. Now they were accused of plotting a communist coup in the free world. McCarthyism in the United States, the witch hunts in Europe, were all fueled by the same fears of a secret conspiracy that once gave rise to the legend of the Bavarian Order. Every liberal became a suspect with ties to Moscow. Every civil rights activist an agent of international communism. Soviet propaganda, in turn, used the image of the Illuminati to explain the aggressive policies of the West. According to Soviet ideologists, the same forces that once financed Hitler were behind the backs of the American imperialists. World capital, united in secret lodges and clubs, sought to establish its domination over the entire planet. The 1960s brought a new wave of interest in conspiracy theories. The Kennedy assassination, the Vietnam War, student unrest. All these events raised a host of questions to which the official authorities could not provide convincing answers. The younger generation, brought up on the ideals of freedom and justice, distrusted government explanations and sought alternative sources of information. It was at this time that the modern version of the Illuminati myth emerged. Now it was not just a secret organization striving for world domination, but a complex system of interconnected structures, from the Bilderberg Club to the Council on Foreign Relations, from the Trilateral Commission to the Bohemian Grove. All of them allegedly served the same purpose: the establishment of a new world order under the control of financial elites. The trilogy Illuminatus by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, published in the 70s, played a special role in popularizing these ideas. By Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, published in the 70s, the authors created a grandiose, paranoid fantasy where the Illuminati controlled all significant events in world history. Although the book was intended as a satire on conspiracy thinking, many readers took it completely seriously. The development of mass media has only intensified the spread of conspiracy theories. Radio shows, television films, popular books. All this formed in the mass consciousness the image of all-powerful puppeteers ruling the world from the shadows. The Illuminati became part of pop culture, heroes of blockbuster films and computer games. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union seemed to put an end to conspiracy theories. After all, one of the main opposing sides had disappeared. The bipolar world had become unipolar. But instead of relief, conspiracists felt even more alarmed. Now there was nothing to prevent the establishment of a unified world government under American hegemony. Globalization, which gained momentum in the 90s, was perceived by many as the fulfillment of long-standing Illuminati plans. The disappearance of trade barriers, the creation of supranational institutions, the unification of culture, all these seemed to be steps towards the very new world order of which Weishaupt had dreamed. The internet has become a powerful tool for spreading conspiracy theories. Now anyone could create their own website and share their suspicions about secret conspiracies with the world. The lack of editorial control meant that the most fantastic theories were given equal rights with proven facts. Search engine algorithms and social media only made matters worse by creating echo chambers where people received information that confirmed their prejudices. The terrorist attacks of 11th September became a new starting point for conspiracy theorists. The official version of events seemed to many too simple. Could a handful of terrorists have struck such a blow against the world's most powerful nation? Were there not more serious forces behind them? Or perhaps the American intelligence services themselves organized the attack in order to get a pretext for military action in the Middle East? The financial crisis of 2008 added new arguments in favor of the conspiracy theory. The collapse of major banks, the collapse of stock markets, and mass unemployment were all perceived as the result of the conscious actions of financial elites. The Occupy Wall Street movement directly blamed the 1% of the population for the deliberate impoverishment of the other 99%. But the most surprising thing was that the Illuminati myth began to influence realpolitik. Politicians who understood the power of conspiracy sentiment began to use it to their advantage. They spoke of fighting the deep state, of opposing the establishment, of protecting ordinary people from the elites. At the same time, these politicians themselves often belonged to the very elites they called to fight against. Donald Trump has become perhaps the first president of a major power to openly use conspiracy rhetoric. His accusations of a deep state, his fight against fake news, his claims of election fraud, all of these were directly drawn from the conspiracy theorists' armory. What were once considered fringe theories suddenly found themselves at the center of political discourse. The COVID-19 pandemic was a new test of human rationality. Quarantine measures, compulsory vaccinations, digital badges, all these were seen by many as steps towards totalitarian control. The Illuminati, Bill Gates, the World Health Organization, all were accused of trying to enslave humanity under the pretext of fighting the epidemic. The reaction to the QAnon movement, a modern version of the belief in a secret conspiracy of elites, was particularly revealing. Millions of Americans believed that the country was ruled by a group of satanic pedophiles, and that Trump was waging a secret war against them. The storming of the Capitol on the 6th of January in the year 2021 was the culmination of this madness. People armed with conspiracy theories tried to change the election results by force. And in all this chaos of theories and accusations, the figure of the historical Illuminati finally dissolved. The Bavarian Order of Adam Weishaupt became a universal symbol, which everyone could fill with its own content. For some, it was communists. For others, capitalists. For others, Zionists. For others, reptiloids. The specific content did not matter. What mattered was the principle itself. Somewhere in the shadows, there were forces that ruled our lives against our will. Why is this myth so persistent? Psychologists identify several reasons. Firstly, conspiracy theories provide simple answers to complex questions. It is much easier to believe that all troubles occur because of the evil intentions of a small group of people than to understand complex socio-economic processes. Second, conspiracy theories give a sense of control. If there is a conspiracy, it means it can be exposed and stopped. Third, they satisfy the need for exclusivity. A person who knows the truth feels enlightened among the ignorant crowd. Modern technology only reinforces these trends. Social media algorithms create filter bubbles where people only see information that confirms their beliefs. Drop fakes and other image manipulation technologies make it increasingly difficult to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Artificial intelligence can generate thousands of fake accounts, creating the illusion of mass support for any theory. Under these conditions, the line between reality and fiction is becoming increasingly blurred. The Illuminati myth is no longer just an amusing conspiracy theory. It is becoming a prism through which millions of people perceive the world around them. And this poses serious problems for a democratic society based on a rational discussion of the facts. But perhaps the greatest irony is that in fighting mythical conspiracies, people often fall victim to real manipulators. Politicians and media moguls who understand the power of conspiracy sentiment use it to achieve their own ends. They create images of enemies to rally against, and thereby gain power over people's minds and hearts. Thus, the ancient fear of secret societies becomes a tool of modern propaganda. The Illuminati, who once dreamed of enlightening mankind, become a symbol of its delusions. And as long as people seek simple answers to complex questions, as long as they prefer convenient lies to inconvenient truth, the myth of the Illuminati will live and flourish, taking new and new forms. In our time, when information spreads at the speed of light, and the boundaries between fact and opinion are blurred, understanding the mechanisms of conspiracy theories becomes especially important. After all, ultimately, our ability to distinguish truth from fiction determines not only our personal well-being, but also the fate of democratic civilization as a whole. Our journey across centuries and continents, from the quiet streets of Ingolstadt in Bavaria to the modern digital labyrinths of the internet, has come to an end. We have traced an amazing metamorphosis, how a small circle of enlighteners turned into one of the most persistent myths of mankind, how noble dreams of the kingdom of reason became a symbol of secret conspiracies. Perhaps the most important lesson of this story is that the human desire for simple explanations of complex phenomena remains unchanged through the ages. And until we learn to accept uncertainty as a natural part of life, the ghosts of the past will continue to haunt the present. Good night, my dear listeners. May your dreams be lucid, and in the morning you will be greeted by a world full not of secret conspiracies, but of endless possibilities for understanding and goodness. See you again in our cozy night air.